11 Omission Commission. Let me give another example. The World Trade Center. They hardly discuss the question of these enormous buildings coming down. They don't discuss any of the problems. One problem is, never before in history have steel-framed high-rise buildings collapsed because of fire. Now, some people say, well, it wasn't just fire, these big planes hit them. Well, people who've looked at this said that's insignificant. Besides, no plane hit building number 7, which is a 47-story skyscraper, and it came down also. Furthermore, even if you were going to have fire weaken a building, it would have to be enormous fires. They would have to be very hot, not ordinary hydrocarbon fires that you get from kerosene, which is what jet fuel is. And they would have to be very long-lasting. These fires didn't last. The South Tower came down in 57 minutes. There's an enormous amount of steel in a 110-story building that is steel-framed inside and outside. And yet they're telling us these. Now, the only thing they mention here, they mention that South Tower collapsed in 10 seconds. Can you imagine how fire would bring down a 110-story building in free fall speed? And that's what it is. Also, the wrong tower collapsed first. The North Tower was hit first. And so if it's fire that's bringing it down, it takes a while for the fire to heat up the steel. So the North Tower should have collapsed first. The South Tower also had a much smaller fire because the plane hit it at the angle, at the corner, and so most of the fuel went outside and burned up. So that enormous fireball you see, you say, boy, what an enormous fire. Well, yeah, for about 15 seconds. And it's burned up, and so there's not much fuel to keep the fire going in the South Tower. And yet, it collapses within 57 minutes. One of the places where you just know they're absolutely lying and cheating is they give you an account that makes it sound plausible that these towers could have come down. They tell you that in the core of each building was a hollow shaft that was just filled with elevators and staircases. Yeah, and 47 massive steel columns. That's what the World Trade, these buildings were all about. This was this unique structure at the time. These 47 massive steel things going up into the air. So massive at the bottom. So even if you accepted the official theory, which is a pancake theory, that somehow the connectors between the columns in the middle and then the peripheral beams around the building, somehow those snapped and then the floors came down and that floor was so heavy it hit the net and it just going down. Can you imagine that happening in 10 seconds? And even if it did, just like if in the old records, when the records fell on the spindle, and those of you who are old enough to remember those, the spindle's still there. So why aren't those 47 towers still sticking up in the air? But the pictures show they totally collapse. You have something that's no more than 3 stories high. You should have had... I mean, just total dishonesty to deny the existence of those massive columns. And then they don't even mention that building number 7 collapsed. There's not a word about it. Everybody admits there is no explanation for why building number 7 collapsed. In most cities, this would have been the biggest building, 47 stories high. It can be ignored only because it was next to the towers. And FEMA says, they come up with this lame explanation of how this building came down. They said, the only explanation we can come up with has a very low probability of occurrence. So, there's no answer. So rather than telling you, like an honest report would, we're surprised, we're puzzled why building number 7 collapsed. There's no good answer. They just don't even mention that it collapsed. They don't tell you that Larry Silverstein, the owner virtually of the building and the builder of it, said on a PBS report, Well, at a certain point, the fire chief and I got together and we said, you know, there's been so much loss of life, let's not take any chances, and we decided to pull it.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull.
Pull it is the slang for bringing it down by controlled demolition. So he admits it in public. It's well known. It's mentioned in any, like my book and other books and all the books that people sent to the commission, assuming they wanted to know the truth. And they don't bring in Larry Silverstein and say, why did you say that? What do you mean by that? Isn't that what a commission looking for the truth might do? Likewise, Giuliani said, we knew that the towers were going to collapse, so we got the people out of building number 7. How did he know the tower? Buildings have never collapsed before in history. How could have he known the Twin Towers were going to collapse? They didn't ask him that. They treated him as a hero when he comes into the commission. They fell all over themselves, praising Rudy Giuliani as the great hero. So what I'm getting at here, those of you who haven't read it, is that all 3 collapses were pretty close to classic examples of what they call controlled demolition. When dynamite or some kind of explosives are placed throughout the building at all the crucial points, and then they put them on a computer and they bring them down in a certain order, and therefore the building comes straight down so it doesn't fall on these other buildings, and they come down in virtually free fall speed. And that's what happened here. All 3 buildings. You can see them on all sorts of places on the website. You don't see them on TV anymore. They showed them the first night, and Dan Rather, bless his soul, comes right out and blurts out the truth. He says, boy, that looks just like controlled demolition. The 9/11 Commission also does not tell you that Marvin Bush, the president's brother, and their cousin, Wirt Walker, were the principals of the company that was in charge of security for the World Trade Center. They don't, all sorts of coincidences here. They also don't tell you that there were many reports of people who worked in the building saying, we got a shutdown order, so for 3 days we couldn't go in the World Trade Center. There were engineers coming in and out. We didn't know what. Okay, moving right along to the Pentagon. They don't tell you that, they do mention that it was the west wing of the Pentagon that was hit. They don't mention that for terrorists who wanted to really strike a blow at the Pentagon, the west wing was the least likely part to hit. Why? Because all the big brass are in the east wing. That's where Rumsfeld and all the top generals are. Furthermore, the west wing was being renovated. So it was reinforced so the fire wouldn't spread to the rest of the building. Also, there were very few people there. And so, although it's tragic that 125 people on the ground were killed, several thousand would have been killed if the plane had hit any other. Well, if it had been a plane, we'll come to that later. But even what it was, it would have killed several hundred and maybe thousand if it had been an ordinary place. And also, terrorists would want to kill Pentagon workers. Most of the people killed were civilians who were there working on the renovation. Furthermore, as I said, it was the hardest place of the Pentagon to hit. You've got this huge Pentagon here with acres. All you had to do was fly right into the ceiling, right into the roof, and you would have done, you couldn't have missed. Even Hani Hanjour could have hit it. And all you had to do was hit the east wing. And, remember how smart these terrorists were? These were masterminds. And yet they didn't know that the west wing wasn't where you would want to hit. Furthermore, the facade, even though it was hit by a Boeing 750, this is official story, Boeing 757 going 400 miles an hour, got a wingspan of 125 feet, got these enormous engines on it, got a tail that makes the plane 40 feet high. It didn't knock the facade down for a half hour. The facade stood after being hit by the plane for a half hour before it fell down. Photographs were taken by Marines and other military